Not everybody can be a business owner. You got to get the right people in the right seats on the bus. Teaching construction is something that can be taught. Knowing money and understanding money is a little bit more difficult, in my opinion. So we went to the banking industry and kind of headhunted a young guy and pulled him out of the banking industry because he really understood the financial side of things and everything. And now he's going to be my operations guy. But really, as you're raising a family and you're young and stuff, you just don't have the money to buy a company and still make ends meet, because you got to have cash flow. And trying to have that cash flow is hard when you're young. So by this way, we pull these guys in and teach them how it's going and everything. And then at the end of the year, we're ready to start selling some of the company off. We'll give them a bonus, and that bonus will go to buy shares of the company. And then the next year, they get their bonus plus their earned dividends, right? That's kind of how we've set it up. And it's like you say, it gives them that incentive because they take ownership of the company. They feel like it's their own company. They are all bought in.
It's a brilliant strategy, Tanya, because they've got skin in the game because you're giving them dividends. So you're not really losing cash because it comes back into the company, which brilliant. You're saving them from a life of crime and prostitution by getting them out of banking. Kudos for you. You've saved their soul. We don't need another Mr. Drysdale twirling his mustache by any means. And you're just opening up a whole opportunity of something that may have never been possible or even within their wildest dreams that they could attain ownership into something that belongs to them. That's brilliant.
Welcome to the Builder Straight Talk podcast with your host, Michael Creso. Get the unfiltered truth from the trenches of construction, real estate, and funding. This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.
Tanya, I figured we should address the elephant in the room. And what I mean by that, I got to be careful because terms so I'm like Homer Simpson. I could be two sentences ahead of my brain at any given
Okay.
time. And it is, did I think that out loud or did I actually say it? So when I say elephant in the room, I don't, it harkens back to a story. I was at NAR on the elevator and coming down to one of the, I guess, workshops, whatever it is. And this woman jumps onto the elevator and gravity has had an effect on her, let's say that politely. And she has all these ribbons on
Mhm.
her. And obviously from all the committees that she's been on and stuff. And I look over without thinking, and I can still feel the swat from my wife's hand across my backside. I said, "You look like a prized hog." And I meant that in a
Oh.
nice way. But so I shouldn't say elephant in the room. But where I'm going with this, how does somebody, as petite as you, blonde with no tattoos, end up being such a successful builder?
Oh, it's been a life of learning and education and a can-do spirit. I started in 1995. We went to build our own house, and I thought, hey, let's build a house. And I couldn't find a house design I liked, and I'm like, well, I'll do that. I'll just design my own. So I learned how, and that's how I started, and it just become my passion. Just over the years of helping people have their American dream, of owning their own home. And it's just become a passion of mine. And female, male, it just didn't matter to me. I was raised with 14 cousins that were all boys, same age as me, and I was just one of the guys. So for me, it was never a difference.
Were there any builders in the family, like your parents, your father, anything like that?
No, my grandfather and so my dad there was 6 boys altogether. They were loggers. They logged up in north of us in a vacation area called Island Park, and my uncle had a sawmill. I always say that I have sawdust in my blood, just because they were loggers back in the day. But no, my uncle was a builder, but he was a commercial builder. Nobody was in residential building at all. So.
Wow, that's it. So you're, if you want to call it evolution. So you
Mhm.
start off as, you're a kid, you're having fun, hanging around the sawmill sort of thing. You go to school, obviously, you get a degree in architecture. Is that where
No,
you went? Or
no, no. Oddly enough, I actually went to school for dance. I was going to have a dance teacher, yeah, right?
sorry.
Crazy story. I went to school to become a dance teacher, and I did. I had my own studio. I had 300 students and everything, and I got pregnant with my son, and I thought, you know what? He's going to go to school all day. I'm going to get home, or he gets home from school, and I'm going to go to work. and I'm going to be gone till 10 o'clock at night. And then I'm going to come back home. I'm never going to get to see my kids. And so immediately I knew, I was on the dance team in college and all that kind of stuff. And I loved performing, but I didn't love teaching. So I knew, right when I was expecting him, that it just wasn't the career for me. So I did have a lot of different things that I did over the years, and while my kids were young, I was a stay-at-home mom, but I still needed that creative outlet and that type of stuff. So that's when we got started. I started building our house. Like I said, in '95, I had a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. And that's when I designed my first house. Was then in the state of Idaho. You don't have to be an architect to do residential design. So I became a draftsman, and I just taught myself how to use AutoCAD back in the day, and just taught myself how to use it. And then after I built our house, somebody asked, "Hey, will you design my house?" And so then I just kind of started as a hobby, really. And I started learning more and more about construction and all the different things that went into it. And I was never a designer that just was sat behind the computer. I had to be out on the job site, so I knew what I was designing work. And so I was out on the job site with the guys and everything. And then it just became, I got to become a builder now. So it just evolved from there.
It must have made for interesting conversations around the dinner table. Honey, passed potatoes. Oh, we're building a house.
Yeah.
Like, how does that even happen?
It was kind of crazy. I always wanted to build a house. I don't know why, where that passion came from. My grandfather, like I said, once he retired from logging, he used to build furniture. And so I think it's just always been that, always worked with my hands, always worked with tools and stuff. My dad had a shop, and we'd do craft projects and different things and stuff. So, always that building side, it never intimidated me. And it was always just a desire to have something different than everybody else. I
Yeah.
didn't want to just go buy a house that was the same as everybody else.
I think that the influence of your grandparents is so crucial because go sit in the corner, Tanya, and go play with dolls or something like that. And I'm not saying you're like the guys, but you already had this proclivity that you wanted to do things with your hands, and you were encouraged by doing that. And I kind of jumped to where we are today. That so many kids, guys and girls. I don't want to say they're discouraged. Maybe so. Like, the trades have this stigma around
Yeah.
them that's where you go if you're not smart, sort of
You
thing. And
know,
you need to go get a degree in some useless, no offense, dance theory,
yeah,
come out 100,000 in debt and homeless, and you have no job and no prospects.
yeah. I was guilty. I have 3 adult children. I was guilty as any of them. My kids were very intelligent. They all have master's degrees, but when they graduated high school, I was thinking, "Man, you gotta go get your degree. You can't get a job without it, can't get a good paying job without it?" But I do think the rhetoric is changing. I do think that we are seeing that, hey, the trades are becoming more important, and I see a little bit of change starting to happen. And especially in my area, our governor of our state is actually giving, grants to kids to go to college in the trades, or, not to college, not traditional college, but into the trades, $7,000 per student that goes into a trade school. So we do see it changing some, but we have to start younger. We talk about it when they graduate high school, but it's not high school you got to start it at. You got to start it when they're in elementary school, and let them know that it's okay if you wanna twist a wrench or, throw some mud or whatever it is that you're gonna do. You gotta start with them young, and you ask little kids, what do they wanna be when they grow up, and they all say doctors and lawyers or whatever it might be, astronauts. That's my grandson, astronaut. But really getting them excited about it when they're young, that's what's important.
I remember you just kind of prompted some fond memories of kindergarten when we had these really big wooden blocks and the planks, and we'd build these forts, and of course they'd come tumbling down. But who knew that those blocks, they're actually building with them today, but now they're made out of composites. And I just did an interview yesterday. He's a former 2-term congressman from Florida, and I'm having a brain fart moment at the time. His name will come to me momentarily. But that's what his company does now. They're building these homes that are bricks and everything. I'm not saying prefab. I don't want to make it sound like it's cookie cutter, but you hand him the design. And then based on that design, they cut it down to exactly what the specifications are. And then it shows up on your doorstep, kind of like, I don't know if you had these in Idaho, but it was a log home in a tube. You open up the tube and the logs would come out exactly the same thing. But I think you're right on point there that we need to get kids involved so they can feel what it's like to handle tools. The fact that we took shop class out of school, like, holy jumping,
Yeah.
I have no idea what they're thinking. So to your point about Idaho actually sponsoring this, what I'd really like to see, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but paying for their tuition outright if they're going to learn a trade. But the caveat is that they have to, whatever the grade point is, like obviously, if it's a 2-year, whatever, they have to maintain that grade level. And when they graduate, then they have to work somewhere within the state where there's an opportunity or where there's a need for that skill, be it a plumber, carpenter, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they do their 2 years, let's say, to repay the debt. And then
Yeah.
once they've done that, hey, go with the grace of God and be the best at what you can be.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because kids nowadays, in order just to afford a house, because the affordable housing is just ridiculous, they're having to move to areas that are paying higher amounts. And Idaho is not one of the highest paid, areas. And so by doing that, and we don't have those regulations as far as they have to stay in the state, but that would be a great thing because then it's kind of that golden handcuff, keep our kids here, for at least a little while just to help pay that back, and in the tax base and in the revenues and the shopping and the dining out and all the different things, that helps everybody in our community. And so that definitely would help pay that off. So that's a great idea, Michael.
Well,
I
in
really,
Michael's Evil World, there's actually a sinister backstory to that because once they've been in a community for a year, 2 or 3, they're actually putting down roots.
yeah, yeah,
And it's really hard to get up and move from one cave to another when you're comfortable by the fire.
right.
So it becomes a win for that community and more so for the state, the likelihood of them going somewhere else, right? Wow, okay. Well, so let's jump from what you're doing into the actual build part. So you took over a company or you started the Candace?
So,
Give me the
yeah,
backstory on
yeah,
that one.
yeah. So I actually, as I was designing houses, had the drafting company. That is, my company, and I still to this day love doing that, and I still do that, and I will probably do that till the day I die. It's kind of my retirement plan. But the construction company, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I want to start my own company," but man, never discount the power of partnerships. One of the contractors that I would draw spec plans for, he come to me and he's like, none of my kids want my company. None of them want to take over. Why don't you just come be my partner and we'll start, a construction company? And I'm like, absolutely. And this was, 20 years ago. And so we started, building high-end spec home, 25 custom homes a year. And it was high-end stuff, and I loved every minute of it. I learned so much from that partner that I couldn't learn. It was just like me paying for an education. Come 4 years ago now, he retired, and so we started, me and a couple other partners started a new construction company, and our construction company currently, we do multifamily, single family, developments. We do all the gamuts of residential building and some light commercial as well. So we started that about 3.5 years ago now. So
Is Idaho a competitive market right now for home builds?
it is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So
it kind of like the market across the U.S. It's slow right now, but our multifamily is still really booming. I always say we're about 6 months behind everybody else, but Idaho's been the fastest growing state for the last 5 years in a row. So we've got a lot of people moving into the state from out of town, ever since COVID and all the work from home, that people are getting out of the big cities, and into the smaller communities. And that's what Idaho is. And we have all the playgrounds all around us. I have Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Sun Valley, Yellowstone National Park, and I'm right in the middle of all the playgrounds. So everybody loves it here. It's great. So,
that's great. When you said COVID, everywhere was better but here.
yeah.
You know, and I saw that here in the city, like, I'm not in the city, I'm 2 hours north, but in the downtown, everybody goes, "Oh, we gotta get out of the downtown, we're gonna die," so they move to the suburbs. Everybody in the
Yeah.
suburbs said, "Oh, we're gonna die," so they move further out, an hour.
I know.
But it's like, yeah. Anyway, I'm not even gonna bite on that apple. By the way, the
Yeah,
guy's name was Patrick Murphy. Patrick Murphy is the teacher. There you go.
nice.
I had that moment. I redeemed
Yep.
myself. Yeah. What hat do you officially wear then with Candace?
I am one of the partners, owners of
Okay.
the company. Yeah.
And so would your specialty then be the design, or do you kinda do a
Uh,
bit of everything, the marketing
I'm
and
over operations. I still have the design that I do, but that, like I said, that's kind of in the evenings, separate, time. But my 8 to 5 hat is operations. But we've set this company up to really give back to the next generation. We've identified some young guys in our company to eventually take over. So really, it's a mentoring. I'm teaching them how to run the company. So my partner is in the accounting. He was an accountant, so he's showing them the paper side, the money side, all that type of stuff. And my job, my role here is to teach these guys how to run a successful company. So the interface between the clients and the company, and how to build a house. Really, the success of how to build a house. So
that part's really cool. So tell me, so you guys have already kind of calculated an exit strategy,
yeah,
and
we have.
I would argue a lot of builders don't. Like, they have, let's say, a successful company, and when the day comes that they don't wanna swing a hammer anymore, they either try to sell it, they try to find an investor that will come in, partner with them, or they just let the fruit die on the vine, which I think is just a horrendous loss.
Yeah,
So, correct me if I'm wrong here, it sounds like you're kind of incentivizing what you would consider loyal, dedicated employees
yeah,
with
for sure.
you're dangling that carrot, "Hey, if you work hard, this could be yours."
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely have our basic. I'll give you a really brief example of what our plan is we've brought, and I've always felt like three partners is just about right number. That way you get that tiebreaker. But we've identified 3 or 4 that have great potential in the company. Can see not everybody can be a business owner. You got to get the right people on the bus. That book Good to Great, if you haven't ever read it, it's a great one. But you got to get the right people in the right seats on the bus. So we went out, and teaching construction is something that can be taught. Knowing money and understanding money is a little bit more difficult, in my opinion. Everybody's opinion is different, obviously, but so we went to the banking industry and kind of headhunted a young guy that I was in touch with since he graduated high school. So, and pulled him out of the banking industry because he really understood the financial side of things and everything. And now he's going to be my operations guy. But really, at some point, as you're raising a family and you're young and stuff, you just don't have the money to buy a company. Sometimes also when you're young, trying to start a company and still make ends meet, because you got to have cash flow, and trying to have that cash flow is hard when you're young, owning your own company. So by this way, we pull these guys in and teach them how it's going and everything. And then at the end of the year, when we have identified, okay, we're ready to start selling some of the company off, we'll give them a bonus, and that bonus will go to buy shares of the company. And then the next year they get their bonus plus they're earning dividends, right? So then they take that money and they can buy more dividends of the company. And it's basically to about a 10-year, maybe 12, depending on the economy. If we have an '08 or whatever, maybe 12 years. But that's kind of how we've set it up. And it's like you say, it gives them that incentive because they take ownership of the company. They feel like it's their own company. We talk about where we're going and what's our 10-year plan. And they are all bought in.
It's a brilliant strategy, Tanya, because, they've got skin in the game because you're giving them dividends, so you're not really losing cash because it comes back into the company, which brilliant. You're saving them from a life of crime and prostitution by getting them out of banking. Kudos for you. You've saved a soul. We don't need another Mr. Drysdale twirling his mustache by any means. And you're just opening up a whole opportunity of something that may have never been possible, or even within their wildest dreams, that they could attain ownership into something that belongs to them. That's brilliant.
Another thing that we've done is one of our framers, wasn't making it. They've been in business for 7 years, and he was like, "Hey, teach me how to do books because I'm just not bidding these high enough, or I'm not enough." He really wasn't, his labor rates were not charging enough is where it was at. But rather than teaching him how, it's like, just come to work for me. We brought his whole crew on. They're all employees now, every one of them. There was 4 of them, and they're all employees, and they're great employees. And we took that stress off of him, and we rent his tools from him. He's making a good living, and his wife is happier than she's ever been because she don't have to do the books anymore. She was working a full-time job and still doing the books. So there's a lot of instances when the guys are just like, yeah, I want to own my own company, but give them ownership, let them act as if they're an owner and give them the power to do what they do well. And he is an amazing framer. He's an amazing guy to get along with clients and everything. But doing the books and all the other stuff that comes along with owning your own company is rough sometimes. They're good at swinging hammers.
Yeah,
But
I can attest to that. I married an accountant because I'm good with crayons. And when it comes to filling out forms, there's a company that wants to work with us right now that's going to handle our LinkedIn marketing, social media marketing. And they sent me this form. It looks like the Magna Carta, like literally, it went on forever. She said, Michael, our standard intake form, fill it out so we'll have a better understanding of who you are. So we had a meeting today. And he said, I noticed in my inbox, you didn't take the time to fill out the form. And I said, well, because number one, you made the assumption that I communicate in the method that you choose and that I think in the method it doesn't work that way. Right. I'm a picture thinker. So before these lips open, and as I said at the beginning, usually there are 2 sentences out of my brain. It's because I've already seen the image and it gets translated into words and I share it. So I kind of see everything before I say it, sort of thing. And I explained to him, if you want me to fill out the form, get a pen, listen carefully, ask me the questions.
ask me the questions. There you
Right.
go.
So to your point, you've identified the strengths that these people have, and you've put them in the appropriate place on your team. Again, that's what a leader does.
Yeah, I mean, your wife is an accountant. My partner, I went and found an accountant for a partner. Because I worked in an accounting office for 10 years. Can I do the money? Yes. Do I love it? No, I hate it. I'm not, I'm more the creative, he's the money guy. And so you got to find the people that, even your own weaknesses, that, they fulfill that position. And it makes it so much better because then you enjoy your job every day. I love coming to work. If I was doing the books, I'd hate coming to work every day. So I think that makes a big difference. And that still comes right back to that. Let people do what they're good at. And
Yeah.
even yourself, you have to even make yourself do what you're good at. And as business owners, we always want to have our hands in everything and do everything, but you got to let up. Don't be a control freak. That's your biggest struggle is don't be a control freak. Let the people that you've hired do the job that you've hired them to do.
Yeah, I can say with 100% confidence that I've never had to identify my own weaknesses. My friends do.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, here's a whole list, every year for my birthday, here's the things that you failed at this year. But um,
Uh,
you tapped on something there about the business, and it made me think of Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth, that what you're doing with your business, but what you're instilling in these people is you can't be all things all the time. There comes a time where you have to make the decision, am I working in my business, which means I'm trapped, or am I working on the business where I can now develop systems that will free me up, that I can do the things that I enjoy doing? Like in your case, you love doing the drawings. And I think many builders fail at that because they think they have to do everything. And then their day from the time they get up till their head hits the pillow, hopefully they're home versus sleeping in the truck. It's putting out fires and trying to keep up. And I think the cold reality is when you hold up the mirror and you say, okay, let's just take a step back here. Tanya, how many hours do you put in the course of, let's say, a week? And what's that goal? What's your income that you want to have? And when you take that net and you divide it by the amount of hours that they put in, and suddenly they see that they're getting $20, maybe $30 an hour.
yeah. Yeah, they're paying
And
their people more than they're getting.
exactly, then I think that's the wake up call, that holy jump, and I got to get organized somehow. How do you instill that into a builder?
Another great book. I love that you're mentioning books because I think I hit 175 books last year. Buy Back Your Time is another great book. I can't think of the author right now, but anyway, basically my philosophy, and it's Buy Back Your Time this is his kind of the whole book was, what are the things at the end of the day? What did I do today that I hated? What was the worst part of my day? Right? You reflect on, okay, the best part of my day and the worst part of my day. I even do that with my grandson. Best part, worst part. At night when I'm reflecting on what happened today and what was the worst part, it's like, okay, I do emails for me are one of my worst. I hate emails. Emails are my nemesis. That's my next hire is somebody to take care of my emails for me because it's just my nemesis. But basically, whatever I hate, that's what I'm going to hire somebody to do. And then once you hire them to do it, you let them have control. So if I'm going to hire somebody to take over my emails, I am going to trust them and I'm going to sit down with them and tell them all of my philosophies on email. This is what I want to see. They're going to sort them. They're going to tell me what's important. Then once a day, we'll go over everything and they'll take care of it. But you have to let go of that control and let them have that. And I get rid of emails. And then that's a way to grow a business from small, single guy out in the truck running a construction company to a large company. You're pulling those guys in and and then it allows you to make the company money in the way that your best performance abilities. So
Yeah, we're delegating, like we said at the beginning. Give each what their strength is, and then let them run wild. Yeah.
mhm.
How many? I'll say employees, but you've got partners too. Let's say overall, how many people are involved in Candace?
Caddis, yeah,
Caddis, right?
we just hired an 18th person. So
18.
that's without. So we're just construction management. We don't self-perform too much work. Just so project managers, accounting guys, superintendents, foremans, and then we have our guys that are push the brooms and clean up the job sites, and they're just as important as anybody in here. But yeah, 18 people.
So then you would bring in trades as you need them, like framers,
Ah,
roofers,
now
right?
subcontractors, I probably have 200 subcontractors, so that we deal with.
So what's the secret then in a competitive market to be sure that you've got good, I don't say regular, that you've got good people that you know that will show up on time, that are loyal to you versus changing, going after another builder that may be paying $2 more?
You mean paying their employees $2 more?
Well, yeah, let's say you've got a subdivision that you're working on, around 30 homes. You're at that point now where you're framing. You're calling up your framing team and they say, hey, Tanya, we'd love to come out there, but we haven't heard from you in a couple weeks. Bob, the builder, is going to be paying us 10% more.
Yeah,
Does
yeah.
that ever
So
come up in your world? Or
we always have an A subcontractor and a B subcontractor. So the subcontractor is the guy that's doing most of our work, but the B guy is always trying to be the A guy.
Yeah.
He's always trying to get the work. We actually cut checks weekly. So we're paying our subcontractors every week. They don't have to wait a full month to get paid for the jobs that they've done. If they submit one by us, a invoice by Friday of this week, they're getting paid on Wednesday of the next week. We cut checks every week. So I think that's something that's very unique in the construction industry because typically everybody's waiting for the bank draw and then they cut the check. When we have enough cash flow that we're paying our subcontractors every week. That's something that is super important. I pay my employees very well. So I have to make up that difference somewhere, right? And that's in build schedule. A typical house that's taken somebody, a custom home that's taken somebody, 9 months, I'm building in 7. My little specs are a 4-month build schedule. We're building a 5-story, 93-door apartment complex. It's 14-month build schedule. It's quick. We got
Wow.
to turn it quick. So
Are you traditional builders like stick frame, or are you like leveraging any of the new technologies that are coming out?
we're traditional for the most part. We've done some Raycor panels or kind of like a SIP panel, that type of stuff. We've looked into prefabbed walls and different things like that. But the technology just isn't here in our state. The closest that we have anything like that is 3 to 4 hours away by the time we get it shipped up here. It's just not cost effective. My framer does build the walls on the job site, but they build all the walls on a trailer and then they stand them individually. So, and that makes it go quicker, that way.
The past handful of interviews that I've done, it wasn't by design, just happenstance, but it's been 3D printed homes.
Hmm.
2 different companies that are doing it with 2 different approaches. And when I first heard about 3D printed, I'm thinking, like, "What are you making, little Lego blocks?" Like, I'm just approaching it again like I'm 6. And, "No, no, no, you moron." Then they show me these big extrusion arms, and you got a guy with an iPad that's literally building a home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of these companies, they have it dialed in to the point where they can do one pass, and they can build a wall 10 feet high, and they can actually have the house enclosed within 2 days.
Isn't that cool? That's so
Yeah, and
awesome.
then you put a flat roof on top of that, and do you wanna drywall it? You don't have to, it's already insulated, but you're doing that for aesthetics, and I thought, "Wow." Then the next guy, this is the Patrick, guy that I did the interview with, he's talking about, I don't wanna call it modular, it's a composite made out of limestone, concrete, so it's a mix, that's the skeletal structure, and then the inside is hollow, and it can be insulated, and those are these big blocks, and they
Yeah.
can assemble a home within a day.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
they don't need any heavy equipment. It's just 2 guys picking up a thing, and they snap it on, they hit it with a hammer, and they're literally building those type of homes that I was telling you about in kindergarten. I think we're at this
Legos.
Yeah, we're at this forefront where technology isn't gonna slowly creep in on us. I think there's going to be this quantum leap where
Yeah.
suddenly you look around and there's a subdivision of printed homes, here's prefabs, here's modulars, like, and the competition will be which one is the better built.
I think that also is going to help with our labor force, because what kid doesn't want to run a crane that's dumping, 3D printing a house, all those gamers out there that love to do that type of stuff, and of course it takes less people to do that as well. But yeah, those type of technologies we have to adapt. One of my business philosophies is change or die. Either you're changing every day or you're dying. Your company's either changing or dying. You gotta adapt with the times, and that I think that applies to all companies, but construction especially. The way we build, we're getting new codes, new energy efficiencies, different things that way. We're always having and you're always learning. You're always learning too. If you're not learning the new things that are coming out, your company is going downhill because the consumers, we now have YouTube University, We didn't used to have that when I was young and learning and I taught myself a lot of things. We didn't learn it on the internet, but man, you have clients that walk through your door and they know as much about building a house as you do. They've learned it, they've seen it and they want all these new technologies and stuff. So I definitely think we have to stay up to date.
When you talk about the new technologies, the one thing that I see coming on big is, I don't wanna say the green home, but they're calling it the healthy home. And again, one of the people that I interviewed, she is what does she call herself? A healthy home biologist. And she actually has a certification and a degree on how you build the most healthy home. So it's not a home that makes you feel good, it's a home that you feel good in,
Nice.
which
Yeah.
is kinda
I love
neat.
that.
And when you think about off-gassing and mold and all the evil things that are lurking about in a home, it makes a lot of sense. And I thought it's, again, to what's happening with technology, I'm just fascinated by, it's no longer about driving a nail into wood. It's okay, you have to factor in all these other different things. Are there any challenges with your company? Like, how do you stay at the forefront of what's happening?
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing with those everybody wants those things. The challenge for us as a builder is how can we deliver that to the client at a reasonable cost? If you've got as much money, as Warren Buffett, you can build whatever you want, right? But we all have budgets. We all, when you're even me building my own house, and I get my labor rates or whatever, I still have a budget that I'm trying to hit. And that is the most important thing in the whole scheme of things. Nobody wants to build their dream home and then have to sell it because they can't afford it. That is a big thing with all these new technologies that are coming on, the clean homes, the kids' asthmas that are all raised up, all these things that's happening over time. You look back and it's like, well, yeah, we build super tight houses now. And before in a 1900 house, there was lots of air that come in and out. And, there's a breeze coming. When the wind's blowing outside, the breeze is coming through, right? And so now we build such a tight home, you don't get that air circulation like you used to and that type of stuff. So we have to put clean air into the house. We have to put fresh air into the house, and to keep it, we want the mold gone. We want all those off gassing, those types of things. But that all comes with a cost. And so how do we balance that, the new technologies and all of that that comes along with that in an affordable price and still give them what they want as far as house?
I have the answer. I call it the thank goodness for rich people.
Yeah.
And the analogy I use is that you remember when flat screen TVs first came out?
Mhm.
And as they were thundering down the production line, I think it was 1 in 20 or 1 in 30 actually worked, right?
Yeah.
So the cost to produce these things was astronomical, but the people that could afford them, quote unquote, are the rich people, and they're buying them. And then once the manufacturers dialed in the process of being able to make these and realized that there was a market, through economies of scale, the prices come down. And I can see the same thing is going to be happening with all these different technological advancements in building as we get to critical mass, whatever that is, that the public is demanding it and more of them are being produced. I think those prices are going to come down. And to your point, it addresses the labor shortage that we have. I think the number, and correct me if I'm wrong, Yuri, you probably know better than I do, for every 5 people that are stepping down, only 1 point something are coming into the trades.
Yeah.
So we're getting to that point where we're going to have that perfect storm, if you will, which isn't going to end well, where you'll have demand and you'll have a labor force that can pick and choose where they want to work,
Yeah.
which then at that point, the prices shoot astronomically up again and we're chasing our own tail.
That's exactly right. At the end of it, when we have those labor shortages, the only way that labor prices come down, how can you lower labor prices? You can't decrease somebody's salary. You have to lay somebody off, right? That's the only way you're going to bring down labor costs. And we don't want that, instead, what's like you say, less people in the industry, less, that's why we are so focused on getting young people in, because that baby boomer generation is all of great builders are all retiring, and how do we replace those guys? That's the challenge. And when we can't replace them, then labor costs go up because there's less and less of them that are doing more and more work.
Is that something that you're doing with your involvement with the National Association of Home Builders? Is that
Yes.
part of your prerequisite is how do we attract more people into the workforce? And you've got to focus on bringing more women into the workforce.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
we touch on that for a bit?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. So, Home Builders Association is I've been involved in that heavily for years. Since 2001, I've been on the board of directors of one association or another. We were on Capitol Hill last Wednesday, and that was one of our major things is we've got to figure out how we can get more people into the workforce. The Professional Women in Building chapter has actually teamed up with Skills America to bring more girls into the industry. 10% of the construction industry is women, is all. 10.1 or something like that. Very, not near enough. And so trying to figure out different programs and different ways to get those kids into the industry is definitely a way one of our goals that we're trying to work towards.
Do you think part of it is that we were talking about the stigma in the first place, like just getting into the trades? Is there a stigma attached to women being in that it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's prejudice. Men are going to take advantage of them. Does that exist as much as we think it does? Or
Ironically, it's the dads. When those kids are 12 or, 14, 15, 18 years old and they're like, hey, I want to be an electrician. The dads are like, I don't want my little girl on a job site, and by all rights, I get it. They don't want their daughter, and so we have to change that and know that, when you walk onto a job site, the guy is just as nervous for you to be on that job site as you are as a woman walking on a job site. As a matter of fact, they're probably more nervous because they just, we gotta know how to treat each other and people in general, right? But yeah, there is a stigma. There's definitely a stigma there. Construction workers, they're commonly known to have bad language and whatever it might be, and they don't want to offend anybody, and so then they all of a sudden they have to act different, And so they're kind of like uneasy of how to, so we just need to learn how that, hey, we're still all people. We just need to treat everybody the same. But yeah, that's no different than any prejudice that people may have, whether it's women or whether it's another nationality or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think it's up to the owner of the company to actually instill whatever that culture is. That if I'm hiring you, irrelevant of the gender, you're 110 pounds. Okay, in my mind, I know what 110 pounds can do. You can't lift 100-pound bags of cement. So it's relative to what your skill set is. And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, are we getting the job done?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we are different physically. Men and women are physically different. That's
Oh,
why.
you'll get in trouble for that one, Tanya. Watch what
Well,
you say.
whether we do or whether we don't. I mean, we have that. We are physically, different. Can I throw a 50-pound bag of concrete on my shoulder and carry it over? Yeah, I can. Do I want to do that every day? No, I do not. Can I lay the tile as well as the other tile guy next to me? Absolutely. I might not carry the big bags of it, but I'm going to figure out a way to get it done. And let's just take that for example. Tile guys, carrying bags of grout and thin set and everything with them. If somebody needs, whether it's man or woman, if they need a wheelbarrow to throw that bag into it, whatever it might be, give the people the tools that they need to make it work. There's some amazing tools out there. They even have shoulder harnesses now. I don't know if you've seen them for like sheetrockers that keep their arms up, that will like hold their arms in place. They're all robotic. So back to that new technologies and stuff. There's some amazing things out there to help people out. So I think we can empower those women to not have those setbacks and not be, I don't know the right word for it, but discriminated against because
Yeah.
of that.
I just started humming a Bob Dylan tune. The times are changing.
Yeah.
They are. They have to,
They
right?
have
But
to. Yeah,
yeah.
right.
But
Yeah.
let's delve more into your leadership roles. I want to look at it from the point of view of like I'm a busy builder, and I'm focused on running a productive company. Like, what's the win? I don't want to sound selfish about this, but obviously, your time is money. You have to allocate your time accordingly. What's the benefit to me as a builder to join an association? And what am I going to get out of it? And how does that translate into, is it opportunity? Is it more money? Like, what is that? What's that hook
Yeah.
that's going to make more people get involved?
Yeah, it's amazing. I would not be here today if I had not been a part of the association and given so much of my time back to the association for free. And I say for free, but it's not. I have gained so much. And let me tell you why. I have builders all across the US that I know. I had a builder in Boise. His sister is moving to Idaho Falls. He calls me and says, "Hey, do you have any spec houses for sale? My sister's moving there. They need a house that's finished." Guess what? She's now my next door neighbor because I had a spec house right next door. I'm doing that apartment complex I talked about earlier. I am building that for another builder in Utah. He couldn't get any subs to come to work for him because they all want to work for Idaho builders, right? So I'm building it for another builder. So those opportunities, but also the opportunity to learn. We sit around the table, you go to your meetings during the day and then you sit around and you go to dinner together and hey, how are you doing this? And you learn so much from that. That's where I've learned everything that I have. It's from those guys. I ask a million questions at dinner. How are you doing this? What are you doing with this? If I'm having a problem, I tell them what my problem is and how have you fixed that? That's what's made my business is that. That's all free information. Just sitting out there waiting for you to come and volunteer a few hours to sit through a meeting. It's the after meeting that is the part that you really glean all that in from.
Do you think part of it is mindset that you shouldn't be going into an association with what can I get? It's like, if you want to sit by my fire, bring a log and we all get warm.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. And also giving back to the industry that's given me so much. You know, I want to give back to that next generation. I want to give back. I have gained so much in my life and it's just been so amazing to do what I can love to do every day of my life. And I want to give back. I want other people to enjoy what I've had. And that's my way to do it. is by volunteering my time. I part of that association at the state level, the national level, and that's how I give back. It really is. So,
Yeah,
and
it
but I've
it's
gained way
phenomenal.
more than I've ever given.
Yeah, to
So,
see where you've, come from, knocking bark off a tree, to
yep.
here you are running a successful building company. I mean, kudos to you.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
it just shows that if you've got the mindset, if you want to apply yourself, the possibilities are unlimited. And
Mhm.
you just have to have that drive and I guess the confidence in yourself that I can do it. Yeah, I can attitude that I can do this. That wasn't a plug for Canada, by the way, but yeah, I can attitude. Yeah.
I can attitude. That's
Yeah.
right. I think a lot of times we really work to get a seat at the table, whether we're women or whoever, as you're making your way up to the top to in a company. And when you finally get to the table, that doesn't mean your work ends there. My work still has not end. You have to work as hard as everybody at that table or harder than anybody at that table. Being in the construction industry, there is, we talk about the stigma of being a woman, but I want the respect and stuff. I want that earned. I want to be able to be respected for what I have done. And you have to know your stuff. One of my favorite stories that I tell people is I actually had a client come into my office, and the husband and wife are sitting across the desk from me. And the gentleman sits down, folds his arms, and slides his chair all the way to the back of my room across the table from me. And his wife's right up on the desk, and he's sitting back in the corner like this, all this. And I'm thinking immediately in my mind, oh man, this guy does not want to build a house. The only reason he's building a house is because his wife wants to build a house. It's either that or he just doesn't think I know what I'm doing because I'm a woman. And and I'm like, oh goody, these are my favorite. These are my favorite. Now I could have taken the offense to that. I could have been offended and upset about it. But to me, that was challenge. Challenge on, buddy. Challenge accepted. And so as we're getting along, I'm looking at both of them as I'm talking, asking questions. And every time I look over at him, he points to his wife. And so I direct the question to her. And finally we get to the garage. And I says, now I know you've got an opinion on this, right? Because you're a guy. You got to have an opinion on this. And he says, I'll tell you what. He says, I have promised my wife for 20 years that I would build her a new home. I am finally at a point in my life that I can make that promise come true. And that's why we're here today, is to fulfill the promise that I made to her 20 years ago. Wow. Was I taken aback? Because I totally judged him 100% wrong. I still get chills to this day about this, but it was so eye-opening for me to realize that you can't judge somebody by how they act or how whatever it might be. He was doing it as a loving, kind thing for his wife. And here I am thinking he's upset and I got to win him over. I did have to say by the end of the meeting, he was right up to the desk and right involved as much as she was. But I think that's like you were saying, that can-do attitude. We sometimes go into things with the wrong attitude. You have to have the attitude of, I could have been offended. I could have, I've actually built his house. I've designed his brother's house in St. George. I've designed their cabins, 3 cabins for the family. I got like 8 jobs off of that one guy, you know? So
Wow.
you just never know. You just never know. So you always have to go into it with a great attitude.
Well, the other option is he could have had a bad burrito for lunch and didn't wanna spoil the atmosphere, and he's at the back of the room. That's
That
the
is
other
true.
that's the more obvious answer, I would think, being a guy, you know?
Yeah, see, that's how you think. Us women think, "Oh my gosh, this guy is mad," you know?
Well, I think when it
So,
comes to being a guy, it's simple. We're simple animals. If we can't eat it, kill it, fix it, or mate it, that's just how it works, you know? You women just tie everything up with emotions and thought. We just yeah.
yeah.
Let's jump back to your company again, Caddis, because with the competition, as you identified, that Idaho is a busy marketplace, competitive. What do you do then to position your company that it stands out? What is there a competitive advantage? Is there something that you bring to the table? And obviously, you've got to be cognizant of what your competition is doing. What
Mhm.
do you do to stand out from everybody else?
Yeah, but, 20 years ago, it was easy because I was the only female builder in town, so that was my advantage. Everybody'd say, "Oh, the woman builder, go talk to a woman builder. She knows, she understands, she thinks about where the bed goes and where all the things that the guys don't." So that's what was my advantage. But now, obviously, I've got, there's lots of women builders here in our community now, which I'm super proud of. That I think that is an amazing thing. But my advantage is that I have been able to surround myself with my employees that are smarter than I am. Those guys, they just are, and they care about the company as if it's their own company. That really is my advantage. So when they're out talking to people, they're talking to them as if it's their own company. When you have one leader and one person that owns the company, and you're the only one that's passionate about it, then you've got one person talking about it in town. When I've got 18 guys that are passionate about this company, that passion just goes out to everybody. When they're talking to people, they're excited about it. They are telling other people about it. And so I think that's really my advantage is all my employees are talking about my company too, you know. And it's their company. It's our company. I shouldn't say my company because it's not my company. It's our company.
I get the our company part because you're incentivizing them to want to take ownership, like the select few. I'm still thinking of the E myth. Like, how do you take what you just shared and how do you put that into a system that's replicatable that another builder can use? So, if you were, I'm not from Idaho. Let's say I'm in North Carolina, right? And you and I are at an association meeting, and I'm saying, Tanya, man, I just don't know what to do. We build a great quality home, but I just can't differentiate ourselves. What would you tell that guy?
What do you do best? What is your strength of your company? What do you feel like your strength of the company is? And then really focus on that. Whether it is build schedule, delivering the product faster than anybody else in town can. Maybe that's not it. Maybe it's the quality. Maybe you have better quality than anybody else. It might take you 2 years to build the house, but it's going to be the best quality house. What is your strength? And I don't think we take enough time, quiet time, phones off, all electronics down, just a pen and a paper and sit down and really analyze what our strengths are and that's where that reflection comes in. What was good and what was bad today? What do we do really well? What does your company do really well? And then focus on that. Really let people know that, because everybody's looking for something different when they come to a builder. Some people are wanting the lowest price. That's all they care about. They want the lowest price. There's some people that want that super high energy efficient home, right? They want somebody that wants that super healthy home because their kids have allergies. So figure out what you are good at and focus on that, and be the best in that and filled, whether it's the healthy home or whatever it is, and really kind of set yourself apart from that.
So, if I'm hearing this correctly, it's identify what my strengths are that would appeal to my marketplace and be able to articulate that in such a way that my prospective buyers would understand that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it kind of reminds me, there was a famous copywriter, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, probably back in the 50s. And Budweiser, of all beer companies, called him in and said, "Hey, we want to create a campaign. We really want to, take our beer to the next level. What do we do?" He said, "Okay, I'm going to have to come out to the plant and I'll spend a week or 2 weeks, whatever it takes. I'm going to document everything I see." So he's basically a tourist in the plant. He's walking around, and the first thing he sees are these big brass kettles. And he said, "Tell me about these kettles." "Oh, well, that we put the hops in there with the water and the barley and everything else, and that's where the beer basically formulates." "Well, what kind of water do you use?" "Oh, it's all pure spring water." And he's feverishly writing all this down. He says, "This is amazing." And the beer master looks at him and says, "No, we all do it." But the
Yeah.
problem is, yeah, we all do it, but the customer doesn't know we all do it.
Yeah.
And so Budweiser was the first one to package that campaign, if you will, about pure spring water and the brass kettles. And that gave him that strategic advantage. So I think, getting back to the question, it's up to the builder to kind of identify what is that thing and how do I package it in a way that it's going to make me stand out, just like McDonald's, just a hamburger. No, it's whatever that golden arches now brings to a person's memory. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. The other thing that I always tell people is, what's your 30-second elevator pitch? You got 30 seconds to make a first impression. Tell me what you do in 30 seconds. If you can't tell me what your company is good at and what I'm going to gain from you in 30 seconds, you've lost me as a customer. So I need 30 seconds to know exactly what you're going to give me and what your deliverables are that's going to set you apart from any other builder I sit down with. And if they can't do that in that 30-second elevator pitch, you've lost them. So know your strength and know how to deliver that to the public.
Yeah, I did that in less 10 seconds when I said, "Yeah, you look like a prized hog." So
That's right.
stay off elevators, I think, right?
Uh,
I mean, we've covered a lot of ground here, Tanya. I'm trying to think of if we've missed anything. Let me throw it to you. Anything that you wanna cover that I haven't addressed?
we talked about partnerships and networking and a lot of different things, but like I said, I'm kind of in that phase of my career where giving back, but mentoring is another area that I really feel like that's another way that we can grow the next generation in, is by mentoring them. But when I say mentoring, immediately people think, "Oh, I don't have time to mentor somebody." I can tell you that I have learned so much from the kids and the women and the entrepreneurs that I'm mentoring, because all of those guys are coming from a different world, right? Those kids that are doing TikTok and they're doing all this other stuff, you learn a lot of stuff about how to market your company and how to do. You can learn as much as from them as you can teach them. So I think when we mentor people, to make sure that you are getting something out of it as well. You're asking those questions. Hey, what social media do you look at? Use that information. I have interns that work there's a college here, and there's a construction management program, and we have interns that intern here, both out in the field and in the office. And those guys, man, they come in here and they will change a process that was hugely, very complex, and they change it to a simple sheet in 2 seconds. It's like, well, why don't you do this? Fresh eyes on your company, like you said, like the Budweiser guy coming in. And they're like, well, why do you do it this way? Why don't you do this? And it's like, I don't know. Why didn't I think about that? So I think mentoring and bringing those young kids in, but let them look at your processes and let them question your processes, you know, because they may come up with something that's like, well, why do you do that when why don't you do it this way? Which is a great thing. So I think you can learn a lot from mentoring as well. And so that's kind of where my career is headed, is mentoring other. I have a builder in Chicago and one in, you know, some of the lower states and stuff, that mentoring them on just a monthly call, I learn a ton from them, a
Yeah.
ton. So,
You just kind of opened a door there. That part of that mentorship is being able to take the ego out of the equation. So when somebody's offering you something, not to finally say, "Well, what do you know? What are you telling me? I've been doing this for before you were born, you young
yeah.
whippersnapper." Yeah, but the one thing, getting back to this Patrick guy, Patrick Murphy, I'm glad I remember his name now.
Mhm.
He's got a company, one of his companies, and basically what you do is you submit. We had a big laugh about this. So you could write it down on a napkin as long as it's got perspective and scale, and our AI will take your plan, and based on where you are, what state, what city, it'll identify all the bylaws. It'll identify everything you need to know about building that home. And it's all done literally in seconds with AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a great jump. And like, this is how far we've gotten with this. So again, to your point, you got to take yourself out of the equation. And when I used to be competitive martial arts, my coach would take me aside from time to time and say, that's a really great way that you're blocking punches with your face, but you may want to take a look at another way of doing it.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. AI is a perfect example. Those kids are in college right now. They are using AI every day. AI is another thing. Either we're changing or we're dying, right? We're either accepting those new ways or we're not going to be part of the discussion, 5 years from now. AI is a part of our world. It's going to be, whether we think it's great, whether we think it's bad, find the good in it, and how to use that. those kids know how to use that. They know what 2 seconds they have AI, they've looked something up and they've written a whole paper on it.
You're gonna
So
laugh. I approach AI like a unknown dog, like I'm polite, I'm cordial. I say, "Please, can you please create me a prompt?" And then I always say, "Thank you," because when, the Terminators do come, maybe they'll treat me a bit less harsh. I don't know, that's just the way I'm
yeah.
thinking. Tanya, if they wanna find out more about you, where can they go?
So I'm on the social media, the socials, I say. Tanya Cromwell. But Build with T is my new brand for mentoring people. They can find me on any of the social media that way. Look up Idaho Home Design. That's a very easy one to find my contact information and everything right there.
Actually, there is one more question that we didn't even discuss it, and you hinted to it. We were talking about spec building.
Mhm.
And, I'd like to talk to you about your relationship with capital. So when it comes to doing spec, how are you doing that? Are you using house funds? Are you partnering? Because any one of those things has its pros and cons.
Correct. Yeah.
And so for a builder, let's say a smaller builder, maybe somebody that's doing, 10 to 15, they want to take that to the next level. What would Tanya's advice be about leveraging money?
The one thing that I am very proud of in my company is I have never had a bank loan for a spec house. I don't do it. And actually, this new company, Caddis Builders, does not build spec homes on company money. If I want to build a spec home, I personally finance a spec home. And Caddis Builders gets, they earn the profit and stuff just as they would a regular contractor. But I take the profit off the spec home personally. Cash is immensely important, cash flow. But there's also, when you're out there, you got people at 8, 9, 10, 12%, that they're charging. It's kind of like those credit cards, I just don't love borrowing money. The problem with borrowing money on a spec home is you don't know what the market's going to do, right? Back in '08 when things were going really good, yeah, build spec homes, build them. But I got a guy that I built 6 spec homes for. It was his money. It was an investor. He's sitting on 5 of them right now because he can't get rid of them, just because the market is kind of in that weird spot right now. Custom homes are great when we have a volatile market like this because if they've got a bank approval, you've got something that's secured. But spec homes I'm more careful with, and if I can't self-finance it, I don't go get a bank loan for it, because at the end of the day, if I've self-financed it, if I need to rent it, I can rent it. If I have a bank loan on it, sometimes they won't let you rent it, sometimes you have to dump it, and then you're paying this interest and all you have to every month you're calculating all the interest on it and everything that way. The one thing, if you want to grow your company and you think that spec homes is the way to do it, find an investor that you can build a spec home for rather than building it for yourself. So doctors and lawyers and dentists and those type of people, they invest in the stock market and they invest in Bitcoin and they invest in, all these different things. And then eventually they get to the point they want to diversify their portfolio, and their portfolio now says, okay, real estate's it. The next thing is real estate. So, when I go to the dentist, we talk about building him, yeah, I had to build a couple spec homes. Do you know of some lots? Yeah, we'll build a couple specs for you, and use their money to build it. Are you making all the profit off of a spec home that you would? Probably not, but you're getting your contractor's fee. You're keeping all your employees employed, right? So you're still in business when times are tough. So that's where I go. If I don't have, a job lined up, or if we're kind of hurting for jobs, that's where I start looking. It's for individual investors that are looking to do that.
If you were to build to scale, like if you were doing, and I guess that you guys don't do this, but if you were doing a small subdivision or subdivision, you're doing 15, 20, 30 homes, you don't really have the facility to do that out of pocket. Then you're looking for investors, and
Yeah.
what happens
So
then?
so I am actually building a 370 home subdivision. We're right now. We'll build all 370 homes, but I am doing that for an investment group. So at the end of it, the investment group owns those houses and they're responsible to sell them. But I don't sell them for them. That's just not the avenue I want to be in. There are some construction companies that are that way, but I'm not one of them. I don't want to be a sales team. I don't have a sales team as well. And that's not what I specialize in. That's not what I'm good at, right? We've talked about focus on what you're good at. That's not what I'm good at. So so we'll build all 370 homes in that subdivision. And I'm going to deliver those homes in 4 months for those guys so that there's enough room that they can make money on those homes. But that's what I'm good at, is getting that schedule and getting those houses built quickly and delivering them that way. And then they take them from there and they have their sales team and then they market them and they sell them that way. Yeah, and there's investment groups out there that are wanting to do big developments. And I've got 5 of them right now that are going, but they're all investment groups that we're building them for.
One last question, Tanya, then we'll call it a day. And I take it through your leadership positions, you've been interviewed before and you've handled this like a pro.
Thank
Despite
you.
my efforts here, the question I've got for you is, has there ever been a question that you wished the person interviewing you would ask, but you've never been asked? And what is that question?
I don't know if there's necessarily been a question. I guess the one thing that I'm most proud of, I guess that would be the question, is what are you most proud of in your career? I was born right here in Idaho. I've lived in the same state, same place my whole life. Growing up, when we were 3 years old, my parents moved out into the country. We lived in a double-wide trailer house. And we were poor, but I had a great childhood. I had a fabulous childhood and everything, but we didn't have a lot. And my parents, they still lived in that trailer house 50 years later. When I was 50 years old, they're still living in the same house. My dad was in a wheelchair, and I remember taking a Sawzall and cutting the door frame off because he couldn't get the wheelchair down the hall. And so 3.5 years ago, I started building a house for my parents, and I was able to build and pay for a house. Unfortunately, my dad got pancreatic cancer and passed away before he was able to get into the house. But the cool part was I was able to promise him that I'll take care of Mom. And the well that we grew up on had sand in it, and the pipes would freeze in the wintertime, and there was no sprinkler system or anything like that. And I was able, after Dad passed away, I was able to move Mom into a brand new home. And she lives right next door to me and has no worries as far as a home. And I think that's what I'm most proud of, is that this career has given me the ability to take care of my parents. And to be able to make that promise to them, was just amazing. And that's why I give back so much to this industry that's given me so much, because it just makes me so proud that I was able to give that to them, But without the great people all across the U.S. of helping me through and teaching me how to be an entrepreneur and how to make it in this construction industry, that would not have happened. So thank you to everyone.
It goes right to back what we were saying earlier. It's all about paying it forward.
Yeah, for sure. So,
Tanya, thanks for taking time out today. Much appreciated. Like I said, we covered a lot of ground. If there's anything I can ever do, reach out. And I do look forward to a part 2. I'd like to go deeper into what you're doing, mentoring with getting more women into the trades. Okay. And I'd really like to do a deep dive on that. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I appreciate you, Michael. Thanks for reaching out to me and somebody you didn't even know. I appreciate that, so that's awesome. And I've really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to Build a Straight Talk. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming players. Until next time, keep building smarter. This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.